Hi everyone, my name is Joyce Gomez-Najarro, and I am an assistant professor in the Department of Literacy and Reading Education at California State University, Fullerton. Today I'm going to be discussing teaching literacy in a remote learning context. A lot of the examples that I will be sharing today will be coming from an elementary school context. However, the principles that we'll be talking about can certainly be applied to a middle school or high school context. So the first thing we want to think about is how we individually define literacy. We want to recognize that conceptualizations of literacy are socially constructed. In other words, they draw from the social, cultural, and historical influences that do shape the way, broadly speaking, people might consider or think about literacy. And then those definitions in turn have implications for how we approach literacy instruction and or assessment. And so we want to be mindful of that as we think about what kinds of steps and approaches we want to take and how that might be shaped or influenced by our own understandings of literacy. So DeWitt and colleagues argue that conceptualizations of literacy have actually evolved quite a bit over time. They point out that this can include early definitions of literacy that might involve signing your name or reciting passages, and perhaps more contemporary understandings of literacy might also be heavily influenced or shaped by high stakes performance assessments. So again, we want to just make sure we're reflective of our own ideas, how we define literacy success, and consider how that might influence the way we interact with our students and families and define literacy. They go on to explain how they define present day literacy. And they explain that in present day conceptualizations, successful literacy achievement includes one, a deep comprehension of text, as well as two, active connections to prior knowledge. So students are able to make these connections to the knowledge they've acquired through their interactions with family or community or other experiences, and they help use that to make sense of the text that they're accessing or reading. They're also able to access or interact with diverse forms of text. So that, of course, can include a picture book, a novel, poetry, but also just text forms, documents. All of these are examples of literacy that students need to be able to interact with and access and have success in understanding. They also need to know how to apply knowledge to appropriate context. In other words, we recognize that literacy endeavors have a purpose, and we know how to use some of those skills and strategies to achieve that purpose. And finally, we also want students to be able to produce knowledge, right? We don't want them to just understand an intended message and regurgitate it on an assessment. We want them to be able to utilize that information, to synthesize it, and to create their own innovative insights and to contribute to ideas and to engage in dialogue. So those are all the kinds of goals that we want to help students achieve within our literacy instruction. We also want to be mindful of the context in which we're working. This transition to remote learning is certainly unprecedented. And so, of course, when we look for research and articles to maybe guide our thinking, it's still rather limited because it's taking place right now, right? People are currently documenting and examining these experiences. Certainly we can draw from articles that talk about how to teach online, but these circumstances are very unique in that we have this sudden transition to remote learning. So there are just a couple points that we want to keep in mind. Some of these come from different examples of literature. Some of these, of course, are anecdotal. And some of these are coming from just information that folks are sharing online as they, talk about their own experiences with this transition. So first and foremost, we want to consider access. We want to make sure that the students that we're serving have access to reliable internet, some type of technological device, be it an iPad or a laptop. We want to make sure that they have tools that are going to be necessary for success. We also want to make sure that we are drawing from students' funds of knowledge. So this is an essential time to draw from the strengths and the gifts and the just the literacy knowledge they're already developing in their households, in their communities, and we want to use that to help them develop these new literacy approaches and skills and to understand these concepts. So now is an essential time for us to learn about those funds of knowledge and to really use those to shape our instructional approaches. So with that, it's also imperative that we are committed to collaboration with parents, collaboration with families, and collaboration with other educators to help us really learn how to, find the most effective approaches to supporting students. With that, we also want to promote student engagement. Without having our students in the same physical space, we want to really take advantage of any opportunities we have to get them to chat with us, to have conversations with one another. So we want to make sure we're mindful of instructional approaches that go beyond just kind of us lecturing and sharing information with students, but also giving them opportunities to engage in dialogue with different individuals, because that is also an important element of literacy. And we'll talk more about that in a bit. We also want to make sure we are developing an organized, predictable system and or routine. So the same way we have, strong systems and structures in place in a brick and mortar context, we want to develop a same or similar approach in this online context. Because when we have those predictable routines, students feel safe, they know what to expect, and that sets them up for success. So whether we're using a platform that might include like Class Dojo or Google Classroom, we want to make sure we have a space that students can go to get the information they need. We want to make sure that they have some type of routine to access the information they need or to have a clear understanding of what's expected of them each day or each week. And we want to just make sure we're mindful of what format's going to work best for our classroom and our students and our families. We also want to keep in mind some of these key principles, such as universal design for learning. So the same way in our classrooms, in a brick and mortar context, we're thinking about the different approaches and ways and modes that students can access information and then share their understanding of content. We want to make sure we're translating that to our online context as well. We also want to make sure that we're accessible to students and families. So there are a multitude of ways that we can do that. We want to make sure that we're sharing those ways. Like, in other words, the best way students can get a hold of us. We're clear about what that system is with our families, so that we can really just help one another. We're supporting one another in these unprecedented, difficult times, and we're there to support each other as we navigate and troubleshoot some of these technology issues we might be having, or other questions or concerns we might have as well. Also, be ready to offer feedback to students. So as they submit things or as they share information with you, consider ways that you can share that feedback with your kiddos. We also want to focus on this concept of reflection. As always, as teachers, we want to just take a minute to stop and think and unpack what's going on in our classrooms and consider what implications that has for next steps. And of course, professional development. That's so essential right now too. We're learning from each other, learning about ways to continually strengthen our knowledge base and our approaches. And so now that we've learned about DeWitt's and colleagues' definition of contemporary literacy, we are going to next talk about what they argue are 8 essential components to literacy achievement. So now we're talking about how we foster literacy specifically in this remote learning context. So the first essential component of literacy achievement is motivation. We want our students to be excited about literacy, excited about reading and writing and listening and speaking and all of these concepts and skills that are going to be essential for their success in literacy endeavors. And so it's very important that we tap into different ways to gauge student interest. So the All About Me graphic organizer or other like paper-based student interest inventories are documents that we can share with students, have them complete those, and they could take a photo of it and submit it to you or email it to you. Or we can also take a digital route by using like a Zoom survey or a poll. These are just different ways that we can learn about what students are interested in, what they're passionate about, what their preferences are, and we can keep all that in mind as we develop our curriculum. This is also an essential time to consider relevancy and specifically family literacy. We really are partnering with families to make sure that we are reinforcing the skills and knowledge that students are learning in this multitude of contexts, whether it's their home or their community or in our digital classroom space. So whether students' understandings of literacy and these literacy skills that they're learning come from storytelling experiences that they have with families, game night experiences that they're having, developing recipe books as they cook meals alongside family members. These are all really important opportunities that students have to develop these different components of literacy. And so we want to learn more about those, give kids an opportunity to share those with us, and to reciprocate that dialogue and those skills so that we can make sure that they're being reinforced across these different contexts. Another important or essential component of literacy instruction is selecting the right text. So obviously we want our students to be very excited about reading. We want them to read as much as possible. And we want them to access text that's of interest to them and that's appropriate for their development. So we don't want text that's too easy or too difficult that might impact their self-efficacy. We don't want them to feel frustrated or anxious. And certainly right now a challenge is accessing, hard copies of text given the circumstances, but there are certainly a lot of really great resources out there to help us provide students with access to digital text. And so I have listed to the right here a couple examples of those resources. And we can also just share a quick snapshot of the third, which is EPIC, to kind of give us a sense of what these resources look like and how they might help students. You'll notice here on the right, Unite for Literacy is basically showcasing in this snapshot just like a little library of books that students can choose from. And these resources are really helpful, and they allow the teacher to kind of help facilitate the books that might be most appropriate for students. So we'll watch the EPIC overview to learn a little bit more about how some of these resources work.
EPIC is an award-winning digital library for kids 12 and under. Once on EPIC, your child will unlock a world of reading, learning, and discovery, getting instant, unlimited access to more than 35,000 high-quality books, videos, and so much more. Kids on EPIC get to explore their interests in a safe, kid-friendly environment with no ads or in-app purchases. EPIC's vast library features thousands of books, read-to-me and audiobooks, and learning videos. From animals and DIY to award-winning literature, STEM, and everything in between. EPIC is personalized for your child, so they get recommendations based on their interests and evolving reading level. Got a future artist at home? A Lego fanatic? Or maybe a science lover? Kids love to choose what they read and watch, and with our constantly growing library, the possibilities are endless. To reinforce their learning, kids can take fun quizzes to test their knowledge and earn badges and rewards. so parents can track their progress and kids can feel proud of how much they've learned. Kids can easily and safely access Epic anytime, anywhere, online or off. It's an entire digital library of knowledge and fun at their fingertips, and it's just one click away. Discover why millions of kids love reading on Epic. Start your free trial today.
So that was our overview of Epic, and these digital libraries also afford, well, another importance of digital libraries is that teachers can use some of the select resources to include specific texts in the context of their own lessons. So in other words, you can grab a book from, or a digital text from Epic to use as an anchor text in a mini lesson that you're going to provide students perhaps through a Zoom class session or something like that. So another great resource that we can use to help kids gain access to books that they can read throughout the week, and also texts that we can use in our lessons with students. Here are a couple different ways and additional ways that you can use Epic in your classroom. On the bottom, you see here a snapshot of what some of the classroom spaces look like. You can see that the students have their avatars, they have their own little profiles where you can kind of track what they're reading and how they're doing as they read the books. Like, it tracks things like how long it takes them to read, how they do on little quizzes that come at the end. And here you can see that other ways that you can use the books include, again, using that book as an anchor text in a lesson, using the whiteboard feature to annotate the books, encouraging students to utilize some of the nonfiction books for research projects. You can do think alouds, you can model specific skills, you can ask them to reread for fluency, a multitude of things that we can do with these texts. So here, the third essential component is phonemic awareness and other aspects of emergent literacy. So what we mean by emergent literacy are some of these foundational skills that we want to help foster amongst our students to help them gain the skills that they'll need to access the text quickly, that will then free up their cognitive spaces to really just comprehend the text and to interact with the meaning behind that text. And so phonemic awareness is this ability to identify and manipulate the sounds within spoken words. And so that's a foundational skill that will help students then access the text. So we do know that the English alphabet has 26 letters, but they actually make 44 sounds. And what we're doing in phonemic awareness lessons is we're preparing students to recognize phonemes. And phonemes are the smallest units of sound in language. So for instance, the word dog, it has 3 letters, but it also has 3 phonemes, because when we're breaking down the sounds of dog, we know that it starts with D. The medial sound is ah, and the ending sound is g. On the other hand, shape has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 letters, but it also has 3 phonemes, because SH together make the unique sound sh. So individually, S says s and H says h. But again, together, we as masterful readers, of course, know that SH says sh, and we just kind of automatically know this. But for our very early readers, we want to make some of these rules very explicit. Similarly, when we have an E at the end of a word, sometimes that makes some of our vowel sounds make that long vowel sound. So whereas A would normally say ah, here it says A. And of course we have the P. So our sounds in shape are sh, a, p. And so these are some of those unspoken rules that we're making very explicit. And young students need to be able to isolate some of these phonemes. They need to be able to blend them to make new words. They need to be able to segment them. They need to be able to just manipulate them. Like if we add unique phonemes or if we delete unique phonemes, can they follow the intended new word? So here are some examples of some of the ways that we can help reinforce phonemic awareness at home. So let's say We start off by offering some type of lesson in which we model for students how we can develop or foster phonemic awareness. We want to follow that up with sharing resources that families can continue to do at home, whether that includes sharing with them some printouts that they can use or pull up perhaps like on their iPhone. We can also list alternative materials if there are certain resources they don't have access to. And we also want to consider ways to assess our student performance. So perhaps students can record some of their some of the work that they're doing. They can record audio of their pronunciation of some of these words or sounds, and that can be something that we use to then consider next steps in our lessons. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we want to be able to offer feedback. So I have here a video of some of the activities that students could do at home to help develop that phonemic awareness. And this video is an example of what I mean by offering families models. So we as teachers can record ourselves, of course, offering a specific lesson or modeling a particular strategy, or you can find great YouTube videos to also help us in that endeavor. So let's go ahead and watch some of these next. Ready to do some segmenting? Yes. Let's do pig. Pig. Great. Now let's see if you can do cat. Cat. Great job. Box. Great. How about mop? Mop. So segmenting. Pull a card. Mop. 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 Excellent. Do the next one. Move your tokens back up. Good job. And we'll get the next card. Bat. It's a bat. Bat. Great job. We'll do one more. Grab the card. Crab. Bug. 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 So again, in this video, we're able to show parents some of the strategies we might want our students to practice at home. And again, as I mentioned earlier, helping parents access the materials they need will be really imperative. So whether that's providing them with a printout of the Alkanen box graphic organizer or giving them alternatives to the chips that the kids are using here. They could really use anything. They could use a penny, or they can use some type of other marker. Just being very mindful of that as we share some of these examples and strategies with family. Another interactive game that we can share with families is I Spy, and no materials required for this game. So in I Spy, you say, I spy with my little eye something that starts with the letter C, and then it's the student's job to look around the house or the space to find something that starts with the letter C. So maybe your child or student might find a clock. And so depending on what skill the student needs to work on, you might share or encourage parents to list items in which the focus is the beginning sound, or maybe that student might need to work on ending sounds. So you're asking them to find items that end with the sound k, which would of course also be clock. So it kind of depends how you want to approach the I Spy game. It depends on what skills students are working on. But again, here is where that communication is really important, and that assessment and feedback is really important, so that you and your families are partnering to develop these experiences that are best suited for individual learners. There are also several different online resources that can be very helpful. Rhyme is such an important component of phonemic awareness, and there are tons of songs and great videos that are out there that are very engaging and that can help reinforce some of these rhyme skills. So here we'll just play a little bit of Down by the Bay. And what I want to note is this screenshot from the video in which they say, "Did you ever see a cat wearing a hat?" And so you can share these videos with families and then also provide them with guiding questions to help target some of the skills you want students to master in their interaction with these resources, such as this video. So, for instance, what happens when we change the in hat to k? So you want the students to, again, be able to manipulate some of these sounds. So we'll go ahead and watch some of the Down by the Bay video so you get a sense of fun resources.
Down by the bay, where the watermelons grow, back to my home, I dare not go, for if I do, my mother will say, "Did you ever see a cat wearing a hat down by the bay, down by the bay, where the watermelons grow, back to my home, I..."
All right, so we won't have an opportunity here to listen to the whole song, but you can get a sense of how engaging some of these videos and resources are. So we do want to learn more about what some of these are and which ones might be the best fit for the specific targets and goals we have for students. Another essential component of literacy is phonics and other word recognition skills. So phonics is really just this process of giving sounds to the letters of the alphabet or letters that are linked to sounds. So in other words, like these phonemes that students can hear in our previous slides, in this context, they are seeing them and recognizing them in text. And really this art of decoding is breaking the code of written language. So in this context, we're giving students the skills to decode language, the English language, through the use of the alphabet. And so we just want to help them, we're helping them learn the rules of of written English so that they can then access the text that they are reading. And so there are also a great number of resources such as videos to help make that student friendly and super engaging. So here is an example of a video that shows students what the phoneme sh is all about.
Happy, cheesy, happy, happy, cheesy, 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 happy, happy cheese sounds. Hi, I love sounds like boop. And even, let's look at this sound. This sound has two letters, S and H. We all know that S says S and H says. When we put them together, S-H say. Just kidding. S and H say shh, shh, shh. Many words start with the S and H, the sh sound. For example, shoes, sheep, shark. Ah! Can you think of a word that starts with the sh sound?
Again, we won't be able to listen to the entire video or watch the entire video, but you get a sense of how some of these resources, again, are making these unspoken rules very explicit for students so that when they encounter these examples in text, they recognize it and they know how to decode or access the text. And there are a number of resources that we can use following a quick mini lesson where we introduce these phonics patterns to students to then reinforce some of these skills. One of these include fun phonics games. So I'm going to go ahead and walk you through the Starfall phonics game and explain how it can be helpful. So here you can see that Starfall is a great resource. It has some games as well as books and other different materials that you can use. So we're going to play the hand game.
Make a word with a, an to match the picture. Fan, an, fan, ran.
Again, here we would have our students follow some of these prompts to interact with the text.
Ran, can.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop here. But I do encourage folks to just explore some of these really great games and resources that again help students manipulate, again, much like the in phonemic awareness and phonics practice, we want them to manipulate some of these sounds so that they begin to recognize them with automaticity when they're reading them in black and white text. And another resource that helps us do that is decodable text. And so decodable text is not to be used in lieu of other rich resources or picture books or novels. Decodable text has a very specific purpose in that it's helping students translate their understanding of these new phonics patterns to black and white text. So they have a very simple sentence structure, and they really are just giving students many opportunities to practice a particular phonics pattern. So whether that pattern is like the SH that we covered in the earlier video, or some of these other short vowel sounds that or words that have like a consonant, vowel, consonant, they're really just giving students some practice with that and some success as they read books. So there's certainly different examples of digital text that that offer some of these practice opportunities. And then also, as I shared in some of the earlier slides, there are different materials and games and activities that we can share with families that students can practice at home. So whether that's creating, you can see here, this little plate manipulative, or this one with plastic Easter eggs, like you can use these to help students get practice with manipulating and putting together these different sounds to make new words. And so we can, as I explained earlier, model what this would look like, share resources, and support parents in helping them develop and foster these learning opportunities at home with students as well. Another great activity is, again, using some of those materials at home whenever possible. And some of those advertisements that come in the mail can be a great way for students to kind of dig and do a search for either letter sounds or phonics patterns, so they can go in, cut those out, create collages, or highlight them or circle them. Just other great ways to use some of the stuff that's maybe already in a household to promote literacy learning. Another essential component of literacy is fluency and independent reading. So as I mentioned earlier, we want students to be able to recognize these phonics patterns with automaticity. So, you know, as educators, we are pretty masterful at like seeing text and just automatically recognizing it and reading through text quite quickly. And that's the kind of automaticity we want to foster in our students. Fluency consists of students' ability to read with speed, as well as accuracy and expression. So it's not just enough for them to read fast. They also want to convey some of the emotions that are intended as they read text. So for instance, if they're reading a story where the character is very angry or very upset, we want them to be able to recognize that and to share that as they read. Similarly, we want them to be able to follow the rules of punctuation. So if it's an exclamation mark they're reading, with greater volume, or if there's a period, we want them to pause. So one of the best ways for them to foster that fluency is to read a lot, and to have a good understanding of some of those phonics patterns. A great way to help students develop that foster that fluency is repeated readings. And there are different ways we can do that. Of course, most importantly, and we just want them to read a lot. And another great way is to help them do repeated readings of fun, short passages, such as poems. So here to the right, we can see some fun poems that we can encourage students to read a number of times. And then what we can do is record what they read, so that we can hear as teachers their progress. They can also track their reading. So like if they're reading the same passage or poem several times, they can time themselves and see their rates get faster and faster. And here is also just a video that shows or breaks down what that process could look like as well. Let's try that again. There you go.
Welcome to Fun with Fluency. Today we will be reading a poem called Turtles by Charles Gigna. Our goal for this activity is I can read with fluency and accuracy. This means you will read the words accurately or correctly. You will use a rate or speed that is just right. You will read with expression and pause at punctuation or the end of the line of the poem. To improve your fluency, we will use the repeated reading strategy. That means we will read the poem several times, getting better with each time we read. For the first read, I will read the poem to you and you will follow along with your eyes and silently read with me. Ready? Turtles. Turtles sit. Turtles wait.
I'm going to pause the video right here. And basically what I wanted to share is an example of how you would present fluency opportunities with your students and families. So notice how in this video, the instructor broke down the steps that everybody would take. It's very clear and the materials are already here and accessible. So this is just an example of how you can present something, or an example of a video that you can locate and use as part of your own instruction. A sixth essential component is vocabulary learning and instruction. So of course, as students are more and more familiar with the vocabulary and meaning associated with that vocabulary in the text that they're reading, that's going to improve their fluency. That's going to also improve their comprehension or understanding of the text. So we want to make sure we're including explicit instruction on key vocabulary. And so there are different levels of vocabulary, and basically each vocabulary word might serve a unique purpose. So specifically we have tier 1 words, which are those high frequency basic vocabulary words that are familiar to most students, whereas tier 3 words are those high utility academic words that might be found across different areas. And then tier 3 words are those low frequency domain specific words. So we want to be very intentional about what kinds of vocabulary we're teaching and mindful of why. So we want to make sure that students have familiarity with tier 1 and tier 2 words, because they'll likely see these words quite often and they're going to help them in a multitude of contexts. So for instance, knowing words like summary and predict, those might be words that students encounter in a literacy specific content area, but also in social studies and also in science and across a multitude of books or text. And so we want to make sure students are developing, these really strong vocabulary, like a strong vocabulary base that will help them in several different contexts. But also we want to be mindful of explicitly teaching tier 3 words that will help them with a particular text they're going to read, or will help them with a particular lesson that pertains to a science experience or a social studies experience. And so, for instance, if we're going to be doing a unit on magnets and we're going to be reading a book about magnets, we want to make sure we're explicitly teaching that vocabulary before students jump into that text. That way they're successful as they read the text, successful at decoding the text and successful at understanding and accessing the intended meaning within that text. And so we want to make sure that we recognize that vocabulary is connected to reading comprehension, not just in reading, but also in this listening and speaking and writing that they're doing. We also want to make sure that they're learning vocabulary through interactions with text, as well as in conversations with others. So all of these are very important factors to keep in mind as we develop vocabulary-specific lessons. And so there are a number of ways that we can approach vocabulary instruction. One of these is through creating digital spaces where students can share the words that they encounter and their experiences with those words. So for instance, here we see a snapshot of a Padlet page. And in a Padlet page, students can post text as well as pictures or audio or video, and there's several other resources that they have there that you can allow students to use to present or showcase their learning or even wonderings. And here in this example, you can see that the students use the text feature to post their understanding. And here in the left-hand upper corner, you can see the teacher's directions for this space. So here it says, word of the day, fascinate. Make a sentence with this word and post it here. And remember to put your name on the post. So you want to be very explicit about what your directions are. I will often also post a couple of examples so students get a sense of what they would like me to do with the Padlet space. And then you as the teacher can see the students' postings, but they can also see one another's. There's also features that allow students to comment on each other's posts. So that's also another great way to increase interaction and collaboration. You can also create different extension opportunities for home. Here you can see a vocabulary scavenger hunt where students can also use other digital spaces to maybe showcase their learning. Here they've taken pictures of the rectangular prisms that they found or the rectangles that they found. And again, this is another great way to allow students to utilize some of the resources in their own households to make connections to the content. There are also several wonderful online games that you can explore utilizing your instruction. Here's a snapshot of Spelling City, as well as a video of Word Girl. So we'll just go ahead and take a moment to explore some of these. Spelling City has several games. And one of the games that I wanted to share is Read a Word.
Welcome to Read a Word. Choose a scene and press play to start. Read the words and click the one you hear. Read and find.
Dad.
My mom and dad are parents.
Dad.
Good. You read the word.
Dad. D-A-D. Dad.
My mom and dad are parents.
Dad.
All right, so here is just a quick example of what this game and its experience might look like. Okay, and the other resource I wanted to share is Word Girl.
What? Battling the butcher on the city streets, Word Girl is about to be pummeled by a sausage cyclone, one of the butcher's signature attacks. Looking for a place to shield herself from harm, Word Girl surveys the area and sees.
So here we can see that the games are a little more contextualized, whereas the previous example with Spelling City was a little more decontextualized. But here you can see the students seeing this vocabulary in context and interacting with it in the
A
game.
towering tree.
Yeah.
The word girl has avoided the butcher's initial attack by diving behind.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and stop there. You can get a sense for some of the different resources that are out there to help students get these experiences that can reinforce the intended skills you have in mind for them to learn. The seventh essential skill is teaching reading comprehension. And so that is the ability to read and listen to or understand text. And it's important to recognize that comprehension is both a complex process and the ultimate goal of reading. And as a consequence, comprehension instruction needs to be a powerful, long-term, and multifaceted event, as described by DeWitt and colleagues. So because comprehension is so multifaceted, it also includes a lot of thoughtful, complex learning opportunities that we have to be mindful of as we plan for instruction. Because remember, it's not enough for them to just recall the information or summarize the information that they read in the particular piece of text. We also want them to apply that knowledge, to analyze it, to evaluate it, to critically evaluate it, and to use that information to then innovate. And I also want to talk about comprehension in connection with this 8 essential component, which is building connections and fostering critical thinking. Freire and Macedo argue that reading is preceded by and intertwined with knowledge of the world. So recognizing that literacy learning is not, in some type of vacuum. It's very much connected to what students are seeing and experiencing and curious about. We want to be mindful of what's going on in the world, what's going on in their space and their experiences, and drawing from that knowledge to help them develop as literacy learners. So their neighborhoods, the stuff that they're seeing on the news, the information they're gathering from newspapers and other forms of text, these are all important factors to keep in mind as we think about how we want to facilitate their literacy learning in our classroom space. So importantly, we want them to actively engage with text. So again, it's not enough that they just read the text. We want them to be able to develop these metacognitive skills where they're being very active thinkers about how, not just what they're learning, but how they're learning, how they're making sense of the information that they're learning about. And so we want to be mindful of that as we find resources that we'll probably be using in our instruction. So one example that I wanted to share is CoreClix, which comes from Scholastic. And I have here a snapshot of what the student's profile could look like. It's kind of similar to some of these other digital text resources like Epic, where you have like this library with different texts. You'll see that they also have articles and videos, but you can also certainly draw from some of those as part of your instruction. But going back to CoreClix, you'll see that they also include these different pop-ups as the students read to help facilitate their learning. So here, for instance, as the students read this piece of text, the prompt is asking them which pair of words from the text are opposite. So it's also reinforcing some of these other skills. And so you can select text that's appropriate for students and that's providing these opportunities to develop skills that you also want them to acquire. And another affordance of this approach is it kind of models for other people who are helping your students, whether it's like parents or other people in the household, what kinds of questions we want to ask. So we can also certainly do that as we're modeling some of these critical thinking strategies, like let's say we're recording ourselves or we're recording lectures or screencasts, but it's also great to use resources that help do that too. So we want students to actively think about some of these concepts, to ask questions as they read to ask themselves questions about their reading process. So for instance, like, what words don't I know? What can I do to find out the, to decode that word, or to find the vocabulary or the meaning of that word? These are all different reading strategies that we as educators use to be successful, and we want to empower students to use some of those same skills. So CoreClicks is just one example of a resource that we can use to do that. But again, other resources could include news articles, videos, advertisements, poems, scripts, and just the list goes on. There's anything goes. Like, we want students to recognize that there are diverse forms of text out there. So you can create PDFs of these, annotate them, or create prompts or questions that prepare students to interact with these. And you can use a variety of resources to do that. And I'll talk about that some more in a sec. But first, I want to go ahead and talk about guided reading, because basically what we're doing is creating opportunities to scaffold students' instruction, or to scaffold these critical interactions with text, and guided reading is a really great way to do that. So here are some steps on how we can approach guided reading in the context of remote learning. So first, we want to model reading strategies that we want students to dive into using videos. This can be stuff that we create through the use of YouTube channels, or even live in Zoom. We can lead guided reading small groups, and in this video we'll watch in a bit, this teacher explains how you might approach that. And we want to encourage students to read differentiated text independently, and in small groups and collectively. And we want to empower parents to support children in that work. Lastly, we want to assess progress and offer feedback. So we're going to go ahead and watch a video of a teacher who's doing guided reading. We'll learn about some of her approaches.
Hi guys, this is Monique, and today we're going to do a video on how we would conduct a guided reading group using Zoom. So I just want to start off with, I know we are super overwhelmed. Some of us feel frustrated and anxious, and to be honest, guys, we're doing the best that we can do as teachers with the resources that have been given to us. So we're learning, we're collaborating, we're sharing, and that's what it's all about. So hang in there, we're gonna get through this, and let's see what we can learn using this video. So I'm gonna be using Reading A to Z, and I'm gonna do a level C book. Of course, this can go whatever level your students are on, go ahead and differentiate it and make it your own and make it personal. What I would do to plan my guided reading lesson is I would make my groups about 4 to 5 students, just like you would in your regular classroom, and I would plan my Zoom meetings using those 4 or 5 students. I would invite those students, and I would have my meeting to be about 15-20 minutes long, just like a normal guided reading lesson, and only have those students join. I would also stretch out my time in between each guided reading lesson to be about 10 to 15 minutes, so that you can go to the restroom, go get some water, freshen up, and get ready for your next class. We want it to be as easy and as simple as possible, and try to make it feel as comfortable as we can. So using Reading A to Z, I'm using a level C book, and what I would do is do a picture walk just like I normally would with my students. So, of course, we'll start at the title, Wash Your Hands. What do you notice about the student? Why do you think Ms. Jackson chose this book? And just have them collaborating. What I would do, guys, since my students haven't been able to see each other, they haven't been able to talk, I would give them this time to talk to me and as well as to each other. I would have them ask each other questions and give them that 1 to 2 minutes, just so it can kind of feel normal. I know in school we're like, come on, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. But honestly, guys, they need it. So after our picture walk, I'll go ahead and go over the focus question. When should you wash your hands? Let them dialogue a little bit. And they also have the words to know. And I'll show you a little bit later how you can use Zoom to give you a whiteboard. And I'll show you that a little bit later, so stay tuned. So like I said, I'll go through my picture walk with them, ask, what is the girl doing? Why do you need to wash your hands before you eat? I would have that dialogue with my students. Now, a neat thing about Zoom is you can have the students annotate on the screen, and I'm going to show you how. I'm going to log in on my phone as a student, and I'm going to show you how you can control that and manage that as a teacher. Okay, so I'm logged in as a student on my phone, and I'm going to show you what you can have the students to do. So let's just say you ask the students, find a word that has the ending sound, shh. Find it and circle it. So I would go in as a student and circle the word. Now let's just say the student made a mistake and they circled another word. You as a teacher have the ability to go in and undo that, and I'm going to show you how. So where it says annotate, you'll click annotate. On the trash can, it has clear. You can clear all drawings. You can clear your drawings as a teacher, or you can clear the viewer's drawings, which is the student. So you can clear and say, go ahead and try again. So they'll try again, and there you have it. So I would continue with my picture walk. And continue with the students. And so when it would get time for us to read, I would have all of my students whisper reading, pointing to each word, whisper reading, just like we would in the classroom. And when it's time for a student to read out loud, I will call on their name. The other students will continue to whisper, and they would read out loud to me. That's how I would do it. A lot of people have different ways how they conduct their guided reading group. By all means, make it yours and have fun with it. Now I want to show you what it looks like on Zoom using whiteboard. Let's say you wanted to do word work, or maybe you wanted to do a sentence stem. Let me show you what it'll look like. So you'll go to where it says new share, select whiteboard, and look guys, you can have everything that you need for you on Zoom. Isn't it awesome? Yes, it is. So right here, I just have some different ideas that I had. Maybe you were using the keywords. You can go over those with your students. Maybe you're doing SH words, or even doing fill in the blanks. Now, also, what you might want to do, some people may want to use a whiteboard at home. If you have your whiteboard and your expo marker, do what you got to do, sis, or do what you got to do, sir. So just like in reading A to Z, the students can annotate on the whiteboard as well. So if you are wanting them to fill in the blank, you can do that as well. Also, another neat tip is you can save these. So you can click save. Let's say you want to put their name on it, click save, and it's saved into your PC. We can't get any better than this. This is just a simple, basic beginner's tutorial of how you can conduct your guided reading group. Of course, once you get to the L's, the M's, the N's, your guided reading group will look totally different from mine, but this is kind of what I'm used to doing in my classroom. So like I said, make it yours, make it personal. If you have any questions or if you have any tips, go ahead and comment down below. If this video helped you, like and subscribe to The Helpful Teacher. I hope I was able to help you. I hope I was able to encourage you. You guys are doing a great job. Thank you. See you guys later. I also wanted to point out there's so many other tips. I also wanted to point out there's so many other tools that you can use inside of Zoom. So go in there, play with it, see what else that you can do. The possibilities are endless. Another thing I wanted to show you is the resources that you have on Reading A to Z. You know how Reading A to Z has all the worksheets that you can attach to your lesson. You can use these and you can upload them to Google Classroom or Seesaw as an extension for your students, or you can create your own extension that you would post on Google Classroom or Seesaw or whatever platform you're using, and then they can turn those in for a grade, if that's what you want to do.
So this video was meant to give you an example of what your guided reading could look like, but as the awesome teacher noted, there are a multitude of ways that you can approach this. So find something that works best for you and your kiddos. And again, collaboration and assessment are really important, especially for this critical thinking, especially for active comprehension. And so we want to assess student learning and encourage collaboration through a multitude of resources that can include, but are not limited to, shared documents such as Google Docs or slides. So here you can see an example of a KWL. You can ask students to share what they want to know about something, what they want to learn about something, what they're learning as they engage with text. So you can use some of those shared docs to kind of engage in that collaboration. You can also use other great resources such as Flipgrid. Here's just a snapshot of what the page could look like. Basically, you invite students to share little videos where they post their ideas, and then they can also post videos in response to their peers' ideas or thoughts. And there are other ways that you can, again, encourage those extensions or encourage various forms of assessment, again, for students to showcase their learning. So you can ask them to, for instance, retell a story through puppets, or, you can share with them like materials for finger puppets. You can also encourage them to write or encourage them to record their own presentations. All right, so I want to thank you for joining me today. I hope this was helpful. In essence, we really just want to continue to build these opportunities to foster lifelong literacy and learning. So hopefully that was able to, this information was helpful in helping you toward that endeavor. Thank you so much for listening. Have a good day.